Greetings, traveler. Do you hear it? The call from the heart of the jungle, where the air is thick with the scent of rain-soaked leaves, and the cries of wild creatures echo through the night. Under the silver light of the moon, or in the stillness before dawn, a story waits to be told. Not a journey by river or road, but by story. A tale of a child lost, raised among apes beneath the canopy, growing with the whispers of the forest and the roar of the beasts. So let your heart be still. Let your breath match the rhythm of the wild. For here, love, wilderness, and destiny entwine. The journey of Tarzan begins now. Once upon a time, a ship crossed the vast and merciless sea. Upon its deck were a man and a woman, newly wed and filled with hopes of a future bright. But the sea is a treacherous master, and it grew restless. Black clouds swallowed the sky, the waves rose like mountains, and the wind howled as if all the demons of the deep had been unleashed. The ship cracked apart under the fury, splintering like a child's toy. Most souls were lost to the watery abyss, but the man and the woman clung to wreckage and were cast ashore upon a land unmarked on any map. This land was no paradise, but a prison of living green. Trees rose higher than towers, their branches knotted together to steal away the sun. The cries of unknown beasts shuddered through the undergrowth, and the air itself pressed heavy, damp, and suffocating. Still, the man and woman did not despair. With their bare hands, they felled trees and raised a house of timber upon the edge of the wild. And within this fragile refuge, they sought to defy the forest. Time passed, and the woman bore a child, a boy with eyes bright as dawn. The parents' weary hearts found joy, for in him they saw both hope and redemption. Yet joy never lingers long when fate has already written another tale. For the forest had been watching, and the forest is never merciful. In the blackest hours of night, when only the insects hummed and the torches burned low, there crept into the wooden house a creature of shadow, a great black panther, its eyes glowing like coals from hell's own furnace. With a bound, it fell upon the man and tore the life from him. The woman, though fierce in her desperation, could not prevail. Blood stained the wooden floor, and the cries of the infant echoed louder than thunder. At last, the beast departed, leaving behind ruin, silence, and a babe alone in the cradle of sorrow. It might have ended there, as so many tragedies do. But in tales such as these, chance and destiny often wear the same face. For not far away, a band of apes roamed the forest. Among them was Kala, a mother whose arms had been robbed of their child by the same merciless predator. Her grief was a wound that would not heal, and she wandered with eyes hollow. Drawn by the sound of human cries, she entered the wooden house and found the child drenched in the scent of death, but still alive. The apes muttered with unease, for the boy was not of their kind. Yet Kayla gathered him into her arms, pressing him against her breast, and in that moment, her sorrow was soothed. She named him Tarzan, which in the tongue of her people meant white skin. And though the great leader Kerchak warned that this human child would bring doom, Kala defied him. She had lost one son, but she would not lose another. Thus, the boy of the storm, child of blood and tragedy, entered the realm of the forest. The trees closed around him, the beasts watched from the shadows, and destiny sharpened its claws. Tarzan grew not as the children of men do, but as the young of beasts. His cradle was the high branches, his lullaby the distant cries of hunting cats, and his teachers the silent watch of the moon and the restless forest floor. The apes accepted his presence with reluctance. Some mocked him with harsh cries and shoves, for he was weaker in limb, bare of fur, and strange to behold. Others ignored him entirely, as if by forgetting he existed, they might erase his shadow from their tribe. Only Kala loved him without measure. Her arms were his shelter, her patience his compass. Yet even she could not silence the doubts of Kerchak, the leader. Kerchak's eyes glowed with distrust whenever they fell upon the human child. "He is not one of us," Kerchak growled. "His flesh is weak. His skin burns beneath the sun, and his hands are those of a deceiver. One day, he will bring ruin." The tribe murmured agreement, for the words of the leader weigh heavy, and fear is easier than hope. But Tarzan, though frail at first, did not surrender to scorn. A fire had been planted in him on the night the panther left him orphaned. That fire whispered, "Endure, learn, survive." He watched the others climb, and though he slipped and fell, he climbed again. He watched them leap, and though he struck branches and bruised his flesh, he leapt again. Each wound became his tutor, each failure a seed of strength. Slowly, he grew swift, cunning, and fierce, though never entirely the same as his kin. The forest itself became his second mother. He listened to the rustle of leaves and learned when storm winds approached. He traced the prints of antelope in the mud and knew where water lay hidden. He tested stones against one another and found sharp edges, useful against roots and vines. Such arts were strange to the apes, who had no need of them. But for Tarzan, they were salvation. Yet the cruelty of the wild was never far. One night, the Black Panther returned, its hunger insatiable, its stealth terrible. It stalked the young apes, and the tribe shrieked in terror. Tarzan, still but a youth, remembered the blood-stained floor of the wooden house. His heart hardened with rage. Seizing a sharpened spear of wood he had fashioned, he leapt upon the beast. The struggle was dreadful. Claws tore his skin, teeth gnashed at his throat, and the night rang with their battle. But Tarzan, driven by grief older than his years, thrust his weapon deep into the creature's heart. The panther convulsed and fell lifeless. Silence cloaked the clearing. The tribe stared in awe at the boy who had slain the nightmare none of them dared face. Even Kerchak, though still grim, lowered his eyes, for fate had spoken. From that night, Tarzan was no longer mocked. He was still not fully one of them, yet none could deny his strength. He had conquered the beast that had orphaned him and Kala alike. In blood and pain, he had carved himself a place within the tribe. Still, when the fire of battle dimmed, Tarzan sat alone and whispered to the dark, "If I am not ape, what am I?" The forest gave no answer, save for the sighing of the wind. Years passed, and Tarzan became a man, broad of shoulder, keen of eye, and swifter than the leopard. He moved through the trees as though born of their branches, his voice mingling with the cries of the wild. Among the apes, he was both kin and stranger, respected for his courage, yet always apart. For his flesh bore no fur, and his thoughts wandered where theirs could not follow. The question of his true nature gnawed at him like a silent hunger. He gazed upon the wooden house his parents had built, now overgrown and silent. Filled with relics he did not fully understand. A shattered mirror, a rusted blade, a book whose pages had become nests for insects. In those ruins, he sensed a hidden truth, but truth remained veiled, like the moon behind heavy clouds. Then, one day, the stillness of the forest was broken. From the sea there came thunder, not of storm, but of man-made fire. Strange voices echoed through the trees, light, lilting, and utterly unlike the guttural speech of the apes. A new tribe had come, not of fur or fang, but of flesh, like his own. They bore weapons of iron and fire, and beasts of burden that groaned under their loads. At their head stood a professor, gray-haired and wide-eyed who marveled at every creeping vine and chirping insect. Beside him was his daughter, Jane, whose eyes were curious yet gentle, as if she carried springtime within her gaze. And among them, cloaked in false smiles, stalked Clayton, a hunter whose heart beat only for gold and conquest. It was Jane who first stumbled upon Tarzan. She had wandered from the camp, sketching the wonders of the forest, when baboons gave chase, shrieking and snapping. Tarzan descended upon them like a phantom, driving them back with shouts and fearless fury. To Jane, he was at once terrifying and magnificent, a wild man with tangled hair, bare skin painted with scars, and eyes that held both savagery and sorrow. At first, they could not speak. She babbled words he did not know, and he answered with sounds she could not understand. Yet curiosity bridged where language failed. Jane taught him the names of things: tree, bird, water, hand. He echoed her, stumbling, then learning. In return, Tarzan showed her the forest as no man of books could. The hidden paths of elephants, the secret nests of birds, the whispers of wind before rain. The two drew close, as though fate itself had bound their steps. For the first time, Tarzan saw not only what he was, but what he might be. He touched his own skin and realized it was like hers, not Kala's. In Jane's eyes, he glimpsed an answer to the question that had haunted him all his life. But the forest is not quick to yield its secrets without a price. Clayton watched with narrowed eyes, his smile sharp as a knife. Where Jane saw wonder, Clayton saw opportunity. A wild man who could lead him to hidden riches, to beasts worth fortunes, to the very heart of the ape's lair. And in his gaze, there was no mercy, only the hunger of a predator cloaked in human form. Thus began the true calling of Tarzan, torn between the world of his birth and the world that had raised him, balanced on the edge of discovery and betrayal. Tarzan's heart was torn in two. By day, he walked with Jane, her laughter falling on his ears like a song he had always known but forgotten. By night, he returned to Kala and the tribe, where silence weighed heavy and Kerchak's eyes burned with suspicion. The apes sensed danger. "These strangers bring fire and hunger," Kerchak warned, his voice like a stone grinding against another. "They will hunt, they will take, and they will not stop until the forest is ash." But Tarzan, longing to know himself, did not heed the warning. For the first time, he had found a mirror of his flesh, a voice that could call him by name. Jane spoke of lands far away, where towers touched the sky, and men bent rivers to their will. Tarzan listened, enraptured, though he understood only fragments. The thought grew in him. Perhaps he was not meant to remain in the forest forever. Perhaps his destiny lay with her. But Clayton listened as well, and where Tarzan saw belonging, Clayton saw profit. He pressed Jane's father with talk of specimens, cages, and wealth. He whispered to Tarzan with honeyed words, "Lead us to your kin, and we shall prove you belong among us." At last, swayed by yearning and blinded by trust, Tarzan led Jane and the others into the secret heart of the forest. They came upon the tribe's dwelling. The apes cried in alarm, scattering into the shadows, and Kerchak descended with fury. His massive fists struck the ground, and his roar shook the trees. Tarzan leapt to shield Jane, his arms spread wide. "They are not enemies," he pleaded, but his words fell like stones into a river. To Kerchak, it was betrayal, pure and sharp. In the chaos, the apes clashed with the intruders, dust rising, blood spilling. Kerchak was struck by a bullet, the iron tearing his flesh. He staggered, rage and pain mingling, before retreating into the depths of the forest. When the battle ended, silence pressed upon them like a coffin lid. Tarzan stood among the broken branches, shame heavier than chains. He had betrayed his people, though he meant it not. Kala's eyes filled with sorrow, yet she spoke no reproach. She led Tarzan to the wooden house of his birth, showed him the faded cradle and the ghostly remains of his parents. "This was once your world," she whispered, "but you chose the forest as well. You must decide where you belong." While Tarzan wrestled with his soul, Clayton acted. Under cover of darkness, he bound Tarzan in ropes, caged Jane and her father, and set forth with guns and whips to capture the apes. The night filled with the screams of beasts and the crack of gunfire. Clayton's men dragged the tribe into chains, their eyes wide with terror. Thus did trust curdle into treachery. Tarzan, bound and powerless, heard the cries of his people, and fury boiled in his veins. The man who had long wondered whether he was beast or human now knew one truth. He would fight like both to save what was his. The forest that once sheltered Tarzan now shook with violence. Chains rattled where apes once played, and the roars of the captured mingled with the mocking laughter of men. Clayton strode among them, his whip in hand, his eyes alight with greed. To him, the apes were not kin, not creatures of breath and soul, but treasures to be sold, trophies to be displayed. Tarzan lay bound, his body bruised, his spirit burning. The ropes cut deep into his flesh, but the deeper wound was shame. He had brought this calamity upon his tribe, blinded by his hunger to belong. Yet shame gave way to rage, and rage gave way to strength. With a cry that split the night, Tarzan strained against the bonds until they snapped like brittle twigs. He rose, every scar upon him now a mark of war, and he descended upon Clayton's men like a storm. The forest seemed to awaken with him. Elephants trampled through the camps, birds shrieked overhead, and vines swayed as if eager to aid their son. Jane, freed in the chaos, fought at his side with fierce courage, her eyes blazing with loyalty. Together, they cut down cages, freed the apes, and drove the hunters into the dark. Yet Clayton did not flee. No, he hunted still, for his pride was greater than his sense. He pursued Tarzan into the towering heights of the jungle, where the air thinned and the branches trembled beneath their weight. The two clashed among the vines, the hunter and the hunted, steel against flesh, hatred against fury. Clayton swung his blade, each strike meant to spill Tarzan's blood. Tarzan met him with the cunning of man and the strength of beast, dodging, striking, driving him higher into the storm-lashed canopy. Thunder rolled, lightning split the sky, and the forest seemed to hold its breath. In his madness, Clayton struck wildly at the vines around them, slashing with no thought but destruction. One vine coiled about his throat, and in his frenzy, he did not see his own doom tightening. He thrashed, cursing, clawing, yet the more he fought, the deeper the noose drew. Tarzan reached out, a cry on his lips, not of pity, but of grim recognition. For the forest had chosen its judgment. The lightning flared, and Clayton fell. When the storm passed, his body hung lifeless among the branches, eyes wide, mouth twisted in a final silent scream. The forest reclaimed its silence, broken only by the rain dripping from the leaves. Tarzan stood alone in the high canopy, his chest heaving, his heart heavy. He had not slain Clayton, yet Clayton was dead all the same. The forest had no mercy for those who sought to enslave it. Below, the tribe gathered, Kerchak wounded and failing. With his last breath, the great leader turned to Tarzan and spoke the words he had long withheld. "You are my son. Protect them, all of them." Then Kerchak's eyes closed, and the weight of the crown passed to Tarzan. So it was that the outcast became the guardian, the orphan became the king. But the crown was forged not of gold, but of sorrow, blood and duty. Long after Clayton's body had rotted in the branches and Kerchak's bones had returned to the soil, the jungle still told the tale of the white-skinned child who became its guardian. The birds sang of his leaps across the canopy, the rivers murmured his name, and the trees bowed as the wind carried his cry. Yet even legends do not live without shadow, for every victory is purchased with loss. Tarzan had known the laughter of parents only for a fleeting moment. His first lullaby had been the screams of death. He had risen to lead not through ease, but through struggle, carving his place with wounds and sorrow. From such a story, those who listen may learn. Strength is born not of comfort, but of hardship embraced and endured. The forest, too, keeps its wisdom. It accepts no master, no conqueror, no thief. It offers bounty to those who walk in harmony, but it devours the arrogant. Clayton had sought chains and profit, and the jungle itself became his executioner. Let this stand as a warning. When man raises his hand to enslave the wild, he prepares the noose for his own neck. Yet hope lives also within the tale. For Jane, who chose love over comfort, and for Tarzan, who bridged beast and man, the forest granted belonging. They remind us that family is not written only in blood, but in loyalty, sacrifice, and the courage to stand beside one another. So the story closes not with triumph untainted, but with truth. That life is both gift and burden, and those who endure with honor will find their place, even in the darkest of forests. And if you listen closely to the wind, you may yet hear Tarzan's cry, echoing like a lesson carved into eternity. Long after Clayton's body had rotted in the branches and Kerchak's bones had returned to the soil, the jungle still told the tale of the white-skinned child who became its guardian. The birds sang of his leaps across the canopy, the rivers murmured his name, and the trees bowed as the wind carried his cry. Yet even legends do not live without shadow, for every victory is purchased with loss. Tarzan had known the laughter of parents only for a fleeting moment. His first lullaby had been the screams of death. He had risen to lead not through ease, but through struggle, carving his place with wounds and sorrow. From such a story, those who listen may learn. Strength is born not of comfort, but of hardship embraced and endured. The forest, too, keeps its wisdom. It accepts no master, no conqueror, no thief. It offers bounty to those who walk in harmony, but it devours the arrogant. Clayton had sought chains and prophet, and the jungle itself became his executioner. Let this stand as a warning. When man raises his hand to enslave the wild, he prepares the noose for his own neck. Yet hope lives also within the tale. For Jane, who chose love over comfort, and for Tarzan, who bridged beast and man, the forest granted belonging. They remind us that family is not written only in blood, but in loyalty, sacrifice, and the courage to stand beside one another. So the story closes not with triumph untainted, but with truth, that life is both gift and burden, and those who endure with honor will find their place even in the darkest of forests. And if you listen closely to the wind, you may yet hear Tarzan's cry, echoing like a lesson carved into eternity.